More than a quarter of a century ago, our guest today published a book about the future of technology called Life After Television. Quote, "The computer of the future will be as portable as your watch and as personal as your wallet. It will recognize speech and navigate streets, collect your mail and your news." Close quote. Our guest is worth listening to today, in other words, in large measure because he got so much right back then. His new book, Life After Google. George Gilder on Uncommon Knowledge now. Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. One of the nation's most important public intellectuals for more than 4 decades now, George Gilder is the author of 19 books. His 1980 bestseller, Wealth and Poverty, made a fresh argument for capitalism and became the volume that Ronald Reagan quoted more than any other. Other Gilder works, Knowledge and Power, The Scandal of Money, and Life After Television, which I mentioned just a moment ago. George Gilder's newest book, Life After Google, The Fall of Big Data and the Rise of the Blockchain Economy. George, welcome.
Great to be here, Peter, as always.
George, in Life After Google, you refer to Google, the company that all of us use for search and Gmail and mapping. You refer to Google, this marvel, as neo-Marxist. What on earth do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people don't really understand what Marxism was. The key error of Marxism was Karl Marx's belief that the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century was a final human attainment, a kind of eschaton, that the problem of productivity and wealth creation had been solved forever.
The end of history of his day, so to speak.
Yeah, and from then on, the only challenge would be how to distribute wealth rather than how to create it. Well, Google Marxism just repeats Karl Marx's error with the new technology. Google believes that their AI, artificial intelligence, their machine learning, their robotics, their algorithmic biology, their search, and their solutions constitute a new eschaton, a new final achievement of human beings. It's even more grandiose than Karl's original vision, and that the Google people imagine a singularity where the machines will eclipse human minds and allow all of the rest of us to retire on beaches and collect a guaranteed annual income, the new fashion in Silicon Valley, while Bren and Paige fly off with Elon Musk to some remote planet in a winner-take-all universe. And I think this is delusional. Google faces impossible business problems, contradictions in their strategy, flaws in their technology, misunderstandings of the very computer science that underlie all their technology. I think Google is having a nervous breakdown.
Oh, I just want to make sure I heard this right. You just called Larry Page and Sergey Brin these geniuses who in 20 years have gone from zero to a company with a market cap of $870 billion at market close yesterday. You just called them delusional. I heard that right?
Yep. There are a lot of delusional, brilliant Marxists in the world.
All right.
Don't you encounter them all the time? I mean, you live at Stanford.
Before we will return to your attack on Google, but first, how did Google do it? We just agree, the company's founded in 1998, so we go from zero, non-existence, 20 years ago, and even 2 decades ago, to a market cap of, as I said, between 800 and 900 billion, depending on the market close the day people listen to us, which makes it the second most valuable enterprise on the face of the planet. Apple just crossed $1 trillion in valuation. So the question is, how did they do it? It is an accomplishment of some kind.
Oh, it's an absolutely fabulous accomplishment. They dominated this era. This is the Google era. We live in it. But the next step is to upload your mind into the Google cloud. And I balk at this next step in the Google system of the world.
You spent some time in Life After Google describing the DALs, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is the huge Google data center up in Oregon. In Life After Google, you write of the diminishing returns of big data. So let me understand let me make sure I understand at least one part of your argument correctly. The delusions come next. First, there are certain almost physical constraints. We've reached the point now at which, no matter how big your data center, improvements in parsing data are only going to be incremental. It's going to be difficult to get enough power. It's going to be difficult to cool these machines adequately, which is why Google's big center is up at the Dalles, because there's a huge dam there, which means cheap hydroelectric power and cold water for cooling. So that's argument number one. They're bumping into physical limitations. Is that correct?
I think this is a symbol. The Dalles and all their data centers parked like aluminum plants beside big bodies of water or near glaciers or various other means of cooling, just like an industrial plant of the previous era. And I think that this cloud computing, which was a great triumph for its time and dominated its time, is now reaching the end of the line. A great computer scientist named Gordon Bell ordained a proposition called Bell's Law, which is that every 10 years, Moore's Law, which is the doubling of computer power every year, yields 100 to 1,000-fold rise in total computer capability and requires a completely new computer architecture. I wrote about the cloud first. I hailed the cloud in an article in Wired in 2006 and said that it would dominate the next Bell's Law phase. But it's now 12 years since 2006, and that Bell's Law regime of cloud computing, huge data centers, all parked by bodies of water, is coming to an end.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand this. I want to emphasize this because I think I'm right about it. Cloud computing, I don't know who the genius was, maybe I'm talking to him now, who first conceived of the notion of the cloud, because it puts in the mind of the ordinary user the sense that somehow or other computing has now become ethereal. It's just up there. It's not up there. It's in big industrial scale operations at the Dalles in Oregon and other. So the
80 different sites around the world, I think Google has now.
Okay.
Big data
So
centers.
the cloud isn't the cloud, it's factories essentially of huge computers. That's correct?
Yes.
All right. You refer, again, let me quote Life After Google. Google is not just a company. It is a system of the world. That is a phrase that is important in this book. Google is a system of the world. What do you mean by that?
Well, a system of the, I think the first sort of great system of the world that unleashed the miracles of the industrial age and the British Empire and of the previous era was Isaac Newton. And he both developed the calculus and the key laws of Newtonian physics, and then proceeded to establish as master of the mint in Britain the gold standard. And this together, the calculus, the physics, the gold standard, were really the pillars of the industrial era and Britain's amazing global dominance from a small island, and that was a great system of the world. It was implicitly deterministic, and
Explain that term. How do you mean deterministic? Because Newton was a Christian.
Newton was a Christian and believed in free will, but his physics and his calculus implied a deterministic model.
If you did this, then this must happen.
That's right.
This action requires that reaction.
Right. A hermetically sealed system that always reproduces the same results with the same inputs, a predictable scheme. And this system of the world was essentially overthrown by Kurt Gödel.
Kurt Gödel is born in Austria. He's he comes to this country. His dates are late 19th century to the middle of the 20th century, roughly.
His great moment at age 23 or 4 was in 1930 when he addressed the great meeting at Königsberg in Austria that was going to establish mathematics as a complete system that could explain everything implicitly. If you had all the data and you had the mathematical algorithms, you could predict the entire future from the past. This was the great dream, and he permanently overthrew it with Gödel's incompleteness theory. He showed that any logical system whatsoever is necessarily dependent upon propositions that can't be proven within the logical system. And in proving this, he really invented a kind of computer software system where all the propositions and variables were expressed in numbers. So his proof that mathematics could not be coherent and completely consistent, that it depended on outside propositions, axioms, was a major breakthrough, and also established the computer age. Alan Turing then went on and took Gödel's formula and transformed it into a universal computer architecture, a Turing machine. And Turing machines are also dependent on oracles outside the machine to program them. Okay. Now Google says it has a system of the world where it's returning back to the deterministic realm. And with big data, they can predict everything. All the answers can be extracted from their aggregations of big data.
You're doing something that you do again and again in life after Google. You're operating on two levels. On one level, you're talking about technology. And Kurt Gödel, in developing these incompleteness theorems he's working on it in the 20s, and the big moment takes place in 30, is that correct?
So 1931 at Königsberg.
Okay. And he develops mathematical tools. On the way to proving his point, he develops mathematical tools which form the basis of computer software language.
Yeah.
So that's the technological point that George Gilder is making. But you are also always arguing about, I won't say theology, because you're not really taking on God, but you are arguing the deep structure of reality. What is reality really like? And so there are pages here that make me scratch my head, because you're talking about technology and math, and that's hard for me. And then there are pages that make my brain explode, because you're talking about reality itself. But I want to come back to this point. Gödel proved that there can be no human construct, no human system of thought that does not rely on some reality outside itself.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And for theological interest, Gödel desperately feared that he might have proved the existence of God.
All right.
He and Einstein used to walk together through the streets of Princeton discussing theology derived from these cerebrations.
Both nervous that they may have They may have been onto something even bigger than they. I see. All right, that's book number 20 for you, George. But back to book number 19. One other point about Google that you make, a shortcoming for Google, is that it gives everything away for free, and which, of course, I sent 10 emails this morning on Gmail for free. I haven't started my research for the afternoon, but I'll be using Google, and it'll be for free.
Yeah.
Okay, this is all wonderful as far as I can tell. George Gilder in Life After Google, not only is free a lie, but a price of zero signifies a return to the barter system, a morass that the human race left behind in the Stone Age. Well, now I am confounded. How can this marvel of technology be dragging us back to the Stone Age?
Well, because of free, there are two key points about free. First of all, it avoids the price system. So it avoids liabilities to customers that you actually have to serve because the customers have paid you. It avoids the requirement of security, because who wants to steal something that's free? It doesn't completely avoid the obligations of security, but it essentially greatly relieves the problems of constantly conducting secure transactions with customers to whom you owe something. And it also prohibits learning, because the key to capitalism is learning curves. As I told you in my last meeting here, wealth is knowledge. And if wealth is knowledge, economic growth is learning. And one of the key instruments of learning in a capitalist system is the signal of prices. And by giving away all its products for free, Google avoids this precarious process of falsifiable learning that is the heart of capitalist growth. So by giving away products for free, they avoid the security challenge to a great extent. They avoid direct liabilities and responsibilities to real customers. And they avoid the learning process that allows capitalist growth.